We have brand new 5 stars. Dante Moore, I'm just going to start with Dante Moore, the quarterback who recently committed to Oregon out of the state of Michigan there in Detroit, all the way up to number 2. And you guys know, especially folks who follow recruiting hardcore, you know what the talk has been. And it's kind of echoed what the talk internally at 24/7 Sports has been, and that is Arch Manning going to remain the number 1 player in the country? Well, at least for today, Arch Manning did remain the number 1 player in the country, but I'm a Dante Moore guy. I'm not an anti-Arch guy. I'm just telling you, I've seen Dante Moore in person. We were out at Elite 11. He came in there, did not lack for confidence, but he's got reason because he's got the skill set to back it up. And at the time, if you'll remember, we were on air out there. And it was cold, so we were shivering, even in Southern California. But I remember sitting at the desk with Will Fong, and Chris Singletary was there, Cooper Patagna was there, our entire staff, and they kept adamantly repeating the following sentence. That race for number 1 is still wide open. And I think today bears a lot of that out. But also, think about the Oregon side of things. I'm not on the Rankings Council, so I just sit back and watch it get released along with you guys. But if you think about what that means for Oregon, and if you really look at Oklahoma and Oregon, I'm going to talk about Oklahoma a little bit later on, the big question you always have anytime a defensive head coach becomes a head coach is, I don't doubt Brent Venables is going to be good on that side of the ball. I don't doubt Dan Lanning and Oregon are going to be good on that side of the ball. But I'm telling you, it sent pretty big shockwaves inside the recruiting industry that Oregon was able to step up and not take a kid from the Pacific Northwest either now. Dante Moore's got offers from all across the country. He's there in Detroit. He's there in Michigan. And he's not going to be a Wolverine, at least not as it looks today. He's going to be an Oregon Duck. Do you have any idea? I think you guys do, but just the general public, the more casual crowd out there, probably not watching the show, do you have any idea what that does? That's as important as making your hire itself. Getting quarterback right knocks down so many recruiting dominoes, and they've got that at Oregon. So Dante Moore up to number 2, and I'll just tell you, I got my ear to the ground at the company. I am basically serving as your source in here. So I take the Dixie Cup, I put it up to the door of the Rankings Council. That thing's not settled. That is not settled. So that's going to go into the senior season. It's kind of crazy that you talk about it in such final terms before guys have played their senior year. It didn't used to be like that. I want to look at the team rankings right quick. An update now that we've got the new 5 stars. We got the rankings update in general. The whole 1 through 25. I'm not going to touch on every team, but a few of them stand out. And I want to talk about Penn State right now because there's a lot of chatter out there in the recruiting industry and in just the message board community in general about how serious to take Penn State. If you're looking on YouTube, and if you're listening on podcasts, let me tell you, Penn State's sitting there with the 3rd highest-ranked class in the country. They've got 19 commits. The average player rating is around a 91.5. So it's not hollow. It's not something where they've gotten fat on inferior product, and just because everyone else hasn't loaded up yet, they're sitting there in the top 3. That's not the case. Penn State may very well be putting together the best class they've had under James Franklin so far, which is interesting. Because what's the talk on the street about James Franklin? What's the talk on the street about Penn State? There's this weird vacuum in college football right now where if you don't come in and immediately take a program to, the fringe of playoff contention or playoff contention, you're just an afterthought. You're just like, you're tossed out on the scrap heap. And the reality is not that. The reality in this sport is getting to the 90th percentile is one thing. And then that final 10% is like this whole different war you have to fight, figuratively. Of course, that's kind of where Penn State is. Penn State's been a very good program. Past 2 years, record hasn't indicated that. I would argue some external factors have come into play. You would argue on the other side that's excuse making. Penn State's a very solid program. And we've already talked, you and I, about this coming season, knowing what they have that they haven't had in the cupboard. And that is, regardless of what Sean Clifford is this year, they've got Drew Aller on the bench. They've probably got Nick Singleton at running back playing this year. Look at this recruiting class. Look at the guys they have coming in. Look at, for example, Tony Rojas is a 4-star linebacker out of, I believe, Fairfax, Virginia. They got him a couple of, feels like a week or so ago now. But then right after that, you see Tamir Robinson, who was, is a 4-star edge guy, but was thought to be a Miami lean. And then all of a sudden he's in the fold for Penn State. That was a big win for that staff. They didn't hide the jubilation on social media. If you follow those guys, they know how big a win that is. So pay close attention to Penn State. Elsewhere, LSU, as of today, the number 8 class in the country. We just heard from Brian Kelly. I was very, very interested to get general thoughts from him. I can't ask him about specific prospects right now, but to get general thoughts from him about recruiting and about what it's been like, because that whole fire hose analogy, that's what a lot of guys say. When you come into the SEC, if you've never been an assistant here, you've never coached here, and all of a sudden you're down here, it's like if you got on the interstate but they didn't give you an on-ramp, if they just kind of set your car down and all of a sudden everyone's going 80 miles an hour around you. Yeah, your car can go 80, but right now it's going 0. So you got to punch it really hard. That's what they've had to do. Napier's having to do the same thing at Florida. I think it's easier for Napier because he's been an assistant in the South. And he coaching at Louisiana, you're still in those territories. Brian Kelly was none of those things. Brian Kelly was at Cincinnati, and he's never coached in the South. And so it's a lot of new, and for his staff, it's a lot of new. And so you notice they started slow, proverbially. They started slow. They have been on fire as of late. I mean, they were in the 30s, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Now they're number 8 in the country. 91.51, I think, is the average player rating there right now. And there's starting to be some real traction. You know, behind the scenes, you're starting to hear more and more of, hey, watch out for LSU with this guy. Hey, watch out for LSU with that guy. Jaylen Brown, that's the one that really caught my attention. When Brown committed, it's a high 4-star receiver from South Florida. When he committed to them a couple of weeks ago, that's the one that really caught my attention. That's the one that a lot of people, I think, publicly celebrated because that was kind of the national announcement of, hey, we're here. We're not going anywhere. I don't think they are. I think in a lot of ways that staff's just getting started. They need proof of product. If you're going to negatively recruit against LSU, certainly it's going to sound something like this. Brian Kelly never had explosive offenses at Notre Dame, and he's never done it in the SEC. Okay, I mean, those things could be true. It could also be true that, like he said in that interview you just heard, there was a lot about himself. He felt like he needed to reinvent. That's not just in recruiting. I get the feeling that he looks offensively at what they have been, what they need to be to win ball games in the SEC and says, probably need to stretch the field a little bit more. And I think they will do that because they're recruiting the athletes to do it. Oklahoma, I got to mention Brent Venables. Same theme as Dan Lanning at Oregon. Defensive coach, defensive lifer, first-time head coach, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got Jackson Arnold in your class. A lot of folks think he may be the best quarterback in the country. He was the Elite 11 Finals MVP a couple of weeks ago. But also, if you ask yourself what Oklahoma was, they were an offensive juggernaut under Lincoln Riley. And then you ask yourself, what will they become under Brent Venables? I think it's natural, more than natural, and understandable for you to expect them to kind of shift philosophically. Well, I'm not saying they won't. In fact, I expect them to. But does it surprise you to know that at this point, Oklahoma's got the number 9 class in the country, and their top 3 commits are quarterback, wide receiver, and offensive tackle? They've done really good. It's a very limited sample size. I'll grant you that. But they've done really good. They've been really aggressive. They took care of quarterback first and foremost. They've been really aggressive, recruiting offensive players. If you were to just close your eyes, first off, last National Signing Day, you probably would have been surprised to see how high they finished given the staff turnover. You just expect them to fall off a cliff because they're losing Lincoln Riley. They did not do that. But then you may say, oh, that's just fool's gold. Now those kids were already locked in. Next cycle, no way they continue that. They're continuing it. I got every reason to believe they'll finish as lofty or close to as lofty as they did last cycle. And my whole point with closing your eyes is if you didn't know there was a coaching change and you just looked at recruiting results, you wouldn't know anything changed at all. There's some other programs I get asked about a lot. I just want to touch on them briefly. Michigan's one of them. Auburn's one. A&M's one. South Carolina is one. They're sitting there, and none of them are in like the top 25. Michigan's 35th right now, and they've got 12 commits, and it's a very incomplete class, so I'm not judging them on being ranked 35th. I think it's fair to look at the what might have been with Dante Moore, but folks in Michigan circles will tell you, given the state of that recruitment, we were not going to be in it. And you can take that for what you want to take it for. There's a certain philosophy around NIL that they are practicing around Michigan. Some of them aren't happy about it, but that's the way they've chosen to go about it. But Michigan, very incomplete. Look, my whole deal with the Harbaugh flirtation with the NFL, come back to Michigan thing was never, is he serious? I don't doubt he's serious. That's only part of the equation. You've got to sell kids that you're serious, and you got to draw them. And if you can't draw them, it doesn't matter how serious you are because recruiting and talent acquisition, that's the name of the game. So this is not writing Michigan's class off. It's just saying there's still a lot, and I mean a lot, of work to be done there. Auburn is 72nd right now. They've bumped up to 70th, I think, today. That's in the last couple of hours. Either way, it's a really low number. But they only have, I think, 4 verbal commits. So what do I make of that? Is Brian Harsin and his staff, are they ones that want to evaluate more a senior film? Are they ones that feel like they can move a little bit later? Do they want to be more careful with their offer list? Are they struggling? All of these things are on the table. I think it takes a cycle or two. Like no one expected him being Brian Harsin, to light the SEC world on fire in recruiting. still a lot of progress that needs to be seen. But again, this is a totally incomplete class. So the ranking, irrelevant. What kind of players do they end up adding? A&M at 61st, or today 60th. They've bumped up to 60th. That's what you get for taking your notes in the morning. They've got 5 commits. And unlike Auburn, there is no doubt here. There's no doubt, at least in my mind. We had a bold prediction last night on the show that A&M will not finish top 20, and I just batted it away. Like, that's ridiculous. Last year, top 20, like finishing 20th, would have had you around a 229 overall class ranking. I think A&M will be above 250. That's probably a worst case for them. So they're going to be fine. They'll close extremely strong. I picture them as a staff sitting around a table saying, why should we move this early on kids? We can afford to take our time. Look how we closed last year. We're Texas A&M, and that means a lot at the recruiting table now. So South Carolina at, well, let me make sure. South Carolina, I think, at 31st or 30th right now. They got 13 kids committed. This is a good class. They're forming a very good class up there. And they've landed a couple of kids now recently that you sort of felt reverberate a little bit. They're getting kids that fit their program. Shane Beamer will be in here tomorrow. We'll be able to talk to him. But I'd be excited. I like, all things considered, I like the returns right now on the South Carolina signing class. Auburn is the one I think most conspicuous in their top 50 absence out of all those that we just listed. But again, keep in mind now, there's still a whole lot that we don't know about the NIL era, the portal era. Keep in mind, there are still programs out there asking themselves, how many high school kids do we want to take? You know, so just keep that in mind. But a big recruiting day, if you have not checked it out, 247sports.com. Also on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. It's a different channel now. They did a lot of programming today on that, so I would encourage you to check that out.